Cooking barbecue ribs on the kettle is a very straightforward process, and it's one of my favorite things to cook low and slow. But have you ever tried marinating them before smoking? Now, does it make a difference, and is a difference worth it? Well, let's find out together whether or not we should be marinating barbecue pork ribs. So let's get this rib party started. I have 3 racks of spare ribs that have been cut St. Louis style. First thing I want to do is remove the membrane. Grab yourself a paper towel, dig a bit under the membrane on one end, and use a paper towel to help you remove it. The plan is to remove the membrane with one motion, so you can look cool in front of your buddies. But it doesn't always work out that way. Some are easier than others, but it's really no big deal if you don't go through with it with one swipe. Just go back and get the remaining membrane off. So in past cooks, I've been known to keep the membrane intact, and I simply score it. But I think the plan to marinate these would help with the flavor to get into the meat if we remove the membrane. For the marinade, I'm using Italian dressing. Any brand will do. I'm giving it a coat on both sides. For those unfamiliar, this is the world's easiest marinade to use on chicken because it's already made. It's great on chicken, and I'm sure it's going to be good on pork ribs. And if you're a fan of the dressing, you already have it in your refrigerator. This is a very common marinade people use. I didn't invent it, but I've been doing it since I was in college and have always been pleased with the results. Let's place in the bag and pour some more dressing. I don't have an exact amount I use, but I'm pretty sure I use like half the bottle here. So maybe a cup and a half of the stuff. Give our piggy a nice little back rub and make sure the dressing covers the ribs nicely. Things look a little dry here, so I'm dropping a little bit more dressing. I was thinking of vacuum sealing this bag, but unless you have a chamber vac, things will get a little messy sealing a bag with liquid inside. So I'm just closing it as best I can and removing any air. If you don't have a large bag like this, you could always cut your ribs into thirds, and then use a gallon Ziploc bag to help you marinate your ribs. One thing worth mentioning is that you do need to add salt to the dressing as part of the marinade. But if you don't, you could always layer in an all-purpose rub the next day right before you cook it. Alright, it's the next day and let's prep our grill. I'm using the 26-inch Weber kettle with the SNS XL insert. I'm lighting about 12 briquettes with some Weber cubes. Let's cover the grill and let the grill slowly come up to temperature. I'm aiming for 250 to 275. Top vent is fully open, the bottom vent a quarter open. These are our ribs that have been marinating overnight. Let's get our ribs out of the bag. Now be sure to season with an all-purpose rub if you did not add salt to the marinade. I'm dropping in some extra pepper because I love me some pepper. I'm cooking up a second rack that's going to serve as my control. This way I have something to compare it to. I'm keeping the seasoning simple. I'm placing in an all-purpose rub. I know it's a debate about whether or not you should put mustard on your ribs as a binder, but I rarely do, since I really don't think it's necessary. Making sure both sides are seasoned evenly, I'm also giving it some extra pepper treatment. The kettle reads about 253 in about 15 minutes. And we're ready to cook. First, I'll place in the marinated ribs. Then my ribs that have been seasoned with an all-purpose rub. At first glance, there's a clear difference in color. The Italian dressing contains vinegar and it definitely changed up the color. Let's cover and start cooking. The kettle ran beautifully throughout. 3 hours later, let's check on it. The color looks pretty much the same on both of these racks. Very, very interesting. They're also ready to be wrapped. First, let's wrap the marinated ribs. I'm not adding anything to the wrap, just making sure it's wrapped tightly. I'm giving our control the same treatment. If you want to punch up the flavor, you could definitely wrap it with a little bit of butter and honey. Once wrapped, let's place back on the grill. I'm putting the control ribs close to the fire this time since the marinated ribs got all the heat in the first part of the cook. Let's cover and let them roll for another hour. about an hour later, the marinated ribs have good bone pulled back and they look like they're done and they're ready to be taken out of the wrap. The unmarinated ribs, however, feel like they need a bit more time. The bend isn't as pronounced and they're feeling a little stiff. So back in the wrap, they go for another 30 minutes. The marinated ribs are getting some barbecue sauce. First, I'll coat the back. Then I will coat the top of the ribs. I will admit they look really nice so far. "20 minutes later, I went ahead and took the unmarinated ribs out of the wrap and gave the same barbecue sauce treatment. So I lost track of time here and I didn't check on the ribs until an hour later. But both are done, but the marinated ribs might be a little bit more done than the unmarinated ones. I'll go ahead and remove the marinated ribs and let's slice into them. They have a really good smoke ring, but they look a little dry. I think I should have pulled them 30 minutes earlier, but let's taste. Okay, that was a tasty rib. The texture was not changed, wasn't altered. The flavor is there, really tasty. And the flavor of the marinade really shines through. Let's cut through the unmarinated ribs, which I think were pulled at the right time. Again, very nice smoke ring, but they're very, very juicy. Now this rack of ribs was a lot thicker than the first one, and it was a lot juicier. And it took a little bit longer to cook down, but that extra time was definitely worth it. So what's the verdict? The unmarinated ribs were juicier, but that's probably due to them being a little thicker than the marinated ribs. The marinated ribs, however, were a lot more flavorful. The marinade definitely did its work and it packed in some awesome flavor. Now, should you do it? Absolutely. Do your own test and see how you like it. The next time I do this, I plan on making my own marinade and cooking them under 1 hour. How do you cook ribs under 1 hour, you might be asking? Well, check out this video next.